So the next big step we have is to create the reflections. And that has to be done by creating another pre-comp of the entire scene. I don't think I'm going to include the fog layers. I can always do that. I can copy and paste them into the scene again later. I think I'll exclude them. We'll just make this full screen. I'll take these and I'm going to pre-compose them into a scene, and I will call, I guess I will call this, well, let's just call it, we'll call it main set 01. Okay. And then, so this will go all flat and weird. We can again just do it like that. So what the best thing to do is actually to create a duplicate composition. So we're going to take the main set 01. Main set 01 is this one right here, which we comp together. So we have the whole set, and this is where everything lives. So now what we're going to do, let's just close this out, is we want to duplicate main set 01. We're going to call this one main set reflection, because this will be the reflection layer. Okay. And let's just, I think we need the water reference layer in there, so we need to copy this. This is going to be our point in which we rotate the whole set around to determine where our reflection should be, but it's not going to be exact, but it'll at least give us a control point. So I'm going to copy this, water reference layer. We'll go to the main set 01, close this, and we'll grab the reflection. And we can just paste this in there. The other thing we want to do is we want to copy the camera. So we're going to go Control-Alt-C. This is a very special way of copying the camera. I just learned about it recently. And then we paste it. And what this does, Control-Alt-C will actually copy and create an expression link to all of the camera's properties that you copied from. So you can delete all this keyframe data here, and the camera will still move. It'll follow exactly what the camera you copied it from does, no matter how you change it or anything like that. So it's linked over. It's a really great feature, and it really will save you a lot of time in, copying, pasting cameras, or creating your own links. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we need to flip this whole scene over, because this scene is actually going to act as our reflection. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to parent everything, parent it to this gradient back here, the sky gradient, and then I'll parent the sky gradient to the water reference layer. And then from there, I'm actually going to flip the scale, and I'm going to change the scale in the Z depth, because see this blue arrow pointing down? That is the Z direction of that layer. So I can just flip that to a -382, and everything should flip upside down. Now it's not going to move exactly as you expect, but we're not going to worry about that right now. Essentially, we've flipped everything. It's the way we need it. So now we will have the capacity to move it up and down and adjust it as we need to get the reflection we want. But the whole point here is to just sort of flip the whole thing over so that we can start getting our reflection the way we want it. So now if we look at the scene, we need to find a way to actually cut the bottoms off of all these layers so that if you actually look at this, so we'll create a composite shot here. So we're going to create a new thing here. So we have the main set, we have the reflection shot, but the reflection shot is kind of our gradient. It's sort of our space where all the 3D stuff is going to live. So I'm going to create a new composition. It's 1920 by 1080, 23976, and this is going to be called Final Comp. Let's call that for now. And within that, I'm going to put the reflection shot, and I'm also going to put the main set reflection. And you'll see that we already have something in place that is kind of working. You can see that we have a bit of a reflection happening. The sky is reflected properly. But we're going to have some problems here, and it's because we actually need to cut the bottoms off of all of these, because they're actually, if I go into this final comp and turn this off, we're seeing all these land pieces up on top of everything. The reason it's being hidden is because it's only showing through the holes that we've made through the water masks. But as you can see, we were already off to a pretty good start. So we're going in the right direction. So if I drop the opacity down, you can start to see what we're actually going to be getting here. and it's pretty decent so far. So what we need to do is we need to create a whole bunch of water reference layers, and that's going to act as something to cut a hole. We're going to actually use them as layer masks. So let's just start here, for instance. We're going to duplicate this water reference, and this I'm going to just rename it as water mask 01. Now what I can do with this is I can create a layer mask. You want to just make sure this mode here is turned on. It's the easiest way to do it. And then you can go, I think it's an alpha matte that we want to do. So if we isolate this, we can actually see, well, this layer isn't the best example, but let's just do another one here. This isn't a good example. Okay, this guy here. So we'll duplicate the water layer mask right there. So in this particular example, each layer is going to have a layer mask. So you see it actually intersects where it hits the water, it cuts it off. So that way anything beyond the water, it's not going to come up above the surface of the water, which is a pretty big help for us. There's a few different ways you can approach this. Sometimes this can even become problematic. So sometimes you have to reposition these layer masks so that they're actually cutting it off where the object actually intersects with the water. But it's a good place to start. So you can at least crop it away from going above the horizon line. So that's where we start with. And if you were to have, like, let's say lots of groups of objects that, like islands that were made up of a whole bunch of groups of objects, you could pre-compose them together and use just one water layer mask. You don't need to have one that is specific to the depth of each object. But what we're going to start with is just one for each one of these guys. And then what we can do from there is we can actually, let's just duplicate this guy. What we can do from there is we can reposition them to actually line up with our objects better. So as we designate a layer mask for each one, then we can adjust it as needed. So, and it's only going to have to be adjusted for a couple of layers, right? Because not all of them need to be so exact. Remember, this is not we're not creating reality. We're doing a representational realism. So it's about animated illustration. It's not about making things that are real, just believable. So here we go. I'm going to continue adding these until I've covered all the objects. Sometimes in my scenes, I'll have hundreds of layers, hundreds. And something like this method right here may not be the most effective. So then it might be important for me to pre-compose a whole bunch of stuff. You just, every project is a little bit different, and there's never a simple one solution, but this can at least get you headed in the right direction. We could also add one of these for the sky. So let me just go here. It's hard to see because of the way it's cropped out. And we'll just duplicate this mask again, and we'll put another one here. I'm just doing one for every layer. And the other thing you could do is you could do the alpha mask to a pre-composed layer, but I want the ability to actually modify each layer just for this particular example. If you treat it as a group, you get each one of these layers doesn't cut off properly. As you can see, this object right here, it's cutting off at this line. If I were to do a layer mask for the whole group and just do one of them, this ground piece would go all the way to the horizon and doesn't actually give me an accurate reflection. So we need them to intersect at the right place. So you can see we're kind of off to the right, in the right direction. But what I'm finding right now is the reflection layer is a bit too low. I need it to be a bit higher. You can see where these waves are. My reflection is going a bit low. So it's easy to fix. I'm just going to lock this. I'm going to go to my main set reflection. And because everything is parented to the water reference layer, I'm just going to pull it up in the y-axis until I get the reflection I want. And the reflection I want is going to give me a feeling that where the water is mostly intersecting, where it's intersecting with the surface, I'm getting my reflection. So kind of getting there. And remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're creating an illusion, and that illusion, the believability of that illusion is all that really matters. So I think you can see we're still getting a little bit of a problem with this. There's a layer here that's creating a big landmass that isn't actually even in the image, and that's because if we go into the reflection, let's just go here. This piece, and we just have to find it. I think it's around here somewhere. That's one of them. It's because this layer mask needs to be more aligned with the position of this object where it's actually intersecting, because right now it's cutting it off at the horizon. So if you don't really understand what I mean here, if we go into custom view you can see that our water layer is actually going quite far beyond the layer itself, in the z-axis. If we were to move it, bring it way forward so that it really aligned with the position more accurately of this layer in the z-axis, so if it cut off more appropriately, it doesn't have to be exact, remember, it's just roughly, because we're hiding a lot. You'll see that that layer starts to get a more accurate reflection. In fact, maybe we've come down a little bit too far for this particular example, so let's have a look at that again. We'll lock this and we'll go into the reflection, and I'll push that layer just a further in the z-axis. So you see how you can kind of fine-tune things. And that's what the strength of this technique is. It gives you the ability to fine tune each layer so that you're getting what you want. There's another one. There's another big offender, whatever this huge guy is. And we're gonna find it. This one. This one is eating up the whole scene when really we only use it in a very small spot. So we need to actually pull this one back too. So let's go back to the custom view and let's pull that position back of that layer mask. Let's bring it forward. Whoops, wrong one. This one here. We'll bring it forward, or you can shrink it, whatever you want. So let's just line it up. You also can go into, if you can go to, I believe, one of the side views. And if we select this layer and you press F, as long as you're in your camera position mode, we can move it around. So we'll put it there roughly. Now that's going to be a little bit, again, it's going to be too far. So we need to probably push that forward a little bit. So let's just lock this, we will lock it, the view in final comp mode, and then we'll just sort of push this back a little bit until it looks the way we want. So basically after this, I've just gone through and realigned a few more of the masks to make sure that everything looks the way I want. Adjusted a few so that they were at the intersection point so that the layers looked good. And if there was a little bit of an overlapping problem, I kind of just tweaked things a bit until it looked nice. And then you see that back island there. That just required that the piece be pushed further back, like the mask be pushed further back. So eventually got it looking good. There are a few areas, if you look at the edges in the water, there's a couple of areas that are actually exposed and they're not really, the sky is showing through, but those aren't going to be a problem because once we apply the displacement map and the distortions and the water ripples and all that stuff, anything like that will probably be lost and won't actually be noticeable at all. So to start that, we're going to grab another water reference layer and we'll bring it into the final comp, and I'll just paste that in there. And we'll put that there. And then other thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the camera from the reflection shot, Control-Alt-C, and we will paste it here, Control-V. And that camera should line everything up. Okay, great. We're in pretty good shape there. We might want to push it a little bit further back since we have this line showing up here. This is actually going to be our object that, I even want to scale it up a little bit. Scale it on this axis. There we go. This will be the object that creates, that we use as a filter to distort the surface. Okay, so we have our horizon line there. We'll just turn it off and make sure to have a look at all this stuff, see how it's looking. Pretty good. Everything's looking all right. So there's a couple things we need to do. We need to create a water filter, something that looks like water. So we're going to call this water. Actually, we could just do this maybe. We have this 3000 by 3000. We'll duplicate this, and we're going to create a composition here. And we didn't need to duplicate it actually, but what we're going to call this is we're going to call this water FX, okay? And maybe we'll call it water FX 01. There's a whole bunch of ways you can go about this. It takes a lot of experimentation to get the actual look that you want. But there's a bunch of tools built into After Effects that make this pretty easy to do initially. So we'll just pick turbulent noise to start. And then we're going to do, I think, smeary. I'm not really sure. I can't remember exactly what I've used in the past. We don't want it to look cloudy. We want it to kind of look more like water. I think strings, actually. Strings does a pretty good job. And then we take the evolution, and you can kind of, we'll just hit this, and we'll go times 300, and hopefully that gives us a nice, this is the start. Like it's not ideal, and we don't need all these tiny little things here. So what this is going to act as is this is going to be our surface lighting, and hopefully actually act also as our deformation. it'll help drive our displacement maps. So I'm going to put the complexity down to 2. So that gets rid of all those tiny little distortions. And then I'm going to boost the contrast up even more. And we're going to continue to play with this until we get it feeling a little bit better. Okay, and now what we want to do is maybe reduce the brightness. The other thing we can do is we can also add movement to it as well. So we could do a transform if we want to sort of match it to the general movement of the water. And so we'll just put it to an offset turbulence, and I can go through the whole thing. And we should probably make, well, we can just make this 30 seconds. It's totally fine. And we'll just move it to the right, a certain amount. You can make it match if you really wanted to. We could go even further. So let's just see how that feels. It might be way too fast. Oh, no, that's all right. And the only reason I'm doing this is because it's kind of a river, so we want to feel like the waves are moving along, like the water's moving along. And the scale is perhaps a little too big. Whoa, that's way too small. I'm looking for something over 70. Now, again, the only thing I've noticed before is that you get these highlight areas all happening at once. I don't know if you noticed that, but you'll see a general, pattern that emerges over the whole thing all at once, which can be a little bit frustrating to deal with. You don't necessarily notice it if you're close enough to the waves, but it can be a problem in a wide shot. So I haven't quite figured out a way to get around that. You see how like all these are emerging almost all at the same time, and I'm not really sure how to get around that. So the other thing is what we're getting here is we're getting much more something along what you would get from caustics, the way that water light looks when it passes through water. So if I invert this, I'm more getting high levels and low levels. So this may be more of what I'm looking for my actual water layer, because I want to try to get this sense of that the surface is lifting and falling, and that it's reflecting light at different angles. And it still may be a bit too bright. So we can bring this down a little bit. We're going to create a number of these because one of them is going to be mostly for our highlights. Another one is actually going to sort of drive the deformation of the layer, like the reflection. And then another one is going to sort of create our highlights and lowlights in the water. So we're going to use these all paired together and try to keep them consistent so that they're working together, so that they feel like they're all the same thing. So that looks pretty decent. So we're going to just take that, and we're going to, first of all, we're going to stick this water effects layer inside of our final comp, and we'll see how it actually looks. Let's go here, and we're going to replace. We're going to do it, just make sure this layer is selected, and we'll alt drag the water effects on top. There we go. And let's just see how it looks. Turn it on. So you can see we have some water. It looks terrible right now, and it's moving way too fast. Okay, so we need to really reduce the transform value here. Right here we have it transforming way too much. So let's go here. So we want it to probably go like, it's just moving way too fast. It didn't seem to be when we were looking at it, but it's so big. It's such a large object that any movement that we have is going to seem quite exaggerated in the final composition. We may even have to increase or decrease the size of things, but that's all right. That's not so bad. I think it's still maybe moving a bit fast. And so when we actually do our highlights, I think I'll continue. If we're actually thinking of this layer more as our highlights, I'll probably reduce the brightness even more. Okay, so let's just have a look and see how this is looking in the main comp. I have it at pretty low resolution just so I can, render it pretty quickly. So you can kind of see what's happening with the highlights and stuff. It doesn't look bad. I think it looks pretty good. The size is probably okay. I feel like if we go much smaller, we're really going to see that tiling effect. We could maybe go a little smaller. So here I just scale it down a little bit further. I think I scaled it about twice just to try to get it looking the way I want it to, getting the scale of the effect right. You can adjust this stuff quite a bit to get the look that you're going for, but once you have it, you can use it as a template for all the other shots. That feels pretty good. I think that feels a lot better. Cool. So this is going to be my highlight reflections. So what I think I'll do with this is I'm going to just put a blending mode for now. I'm going to put it to add, and you'll be able to see sort of what's happening here. And what I'm going to do with that as well is I'll probably put a tint on it because I want it to reflect the color of the sky. So my white will be more of a pink color. So as you can see, we'll start getting this. It's going to feel more like the actual sky. I think it's still moving horizontally way too fast. So let's just cut that in half once again. I'm just going to put a keyframe here and then pull it over. Just a fast way to bring the move down a little bit. Let's have a look at the final comp again. So that's probably feeling maybe a little bit better. Okay, cool. Well, it's good enough. We can add on to it later, but I think it feels pretty good. Okay, so then the next thing we want to do is we want to we can add a little bit more variety to this. So I think that's a pretty good highlight. Then what maybe we want is, so we have our highlight, so we can maybe change the name of this comp to Water FX. We'll call this HL for highlight, and then we can create something that's a little bit broader. I might even increase the contrast more to like 400. Oh, actually, let's drop the brightness down. I might make this even more rare. So when we look at the final comp, we just have these few little spots here. So then what we'll do here is we'll just duplicate this composition. So we have highlight, and then I don't know what I don't know what this would be called, like a medium light or something. I don't know what you call that. So we'll call this this will be our medium highlight. So then with this one, what I'll do is I'm going to use like the exact same effect, and I'll turn the brightness up a bit more, and so we'll have more surface area on that, and turn the contrast down just a bit, and bring the brightness up a bit, and so we're going to get more of a general lighting, and then what that can do is we should be able to pair them together if you want. Like, you can go really deep with this stuff, but now what we should be able to do is we should be able to pair the two together. So this is our medium light there. Oh wait, actually let's just duplicate this, and then swap it in here. And so this will be called FX HL, and let's just check the source name and medium light. Okay, so now what we should have is they should line up perfectly, but then what we want to do is just take this and can bring its transparency down to like 50%, and that'll give us like just another level of lighting that is a little bit lower and a little bit wider. It just gives you a little something extra. We can even expand it further. So if the medium light, we don't want to change the scale. If we change the scale, it changes the overall thing. So we really we have to just work within the limits of we want it to correspond. Well, I'd like it to correspond to the actual layers itself. So here we go. Hopefully, let's check the highlights. So let's just check one more time on the final comp. So we should get these little hot spots, and then we should get a little bit of another level of the movement. Cool. So we're starting to get a nice effect here. The next thing we need to, and the reason that's looking weird is because the reflection set to 50%, which we'll actually end up putting to 100, and then we'll add another thing on top to actually adjust that properly, because I was just quickly fixing that. You can already see how some of those problems we were talking about are already starting to disappear because we're creating such a busy surface. So it's not nearly as noticeable, and once we get the displacement maps and distortion on there, we're not going to see it at all. So we can really just move into the next step now.